Hello friends and welcome to the program. This video is in response to a myriad of queries that we've received from CPA candidates relating to the question of exams. Many candidates have written to us, some wondering why after completing the syllabus they continue to fail exams. Others have stated that they have to sit for exams many times before passing the CPA papers. Another one told me, the more I read, the more I feel that I am blank. Recently, I visited the Kenya National Library just to see how the candidates are studying, and I was saddened to observe that most of the candidates are using techniques that have been proven by research to be the most ineffective. In this video, I will highlight some of the reasons why the techniques we are using are not effective. I'll also suggest one technique which, if you use, will be very helpful in retaining information in your memory for a long time. This is a technique that is heavily supported by research. Many neuropsychologists, many psychology professors are all in consensus that this is the most effective technique in studying and learning. Interestingly, candidates, the Torah supports this technique. It is recorded in the Torah that and these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. How do you retain words in your heart? Candidates, this is what you are seeking to do as you prepare for your exams. You are studying so that you can retain that information to be retrieved in an exam. The Torah says, and these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. The Torah continues to state how that can be done. The scientists have carried out research, experiments, studies for a period spanning more than 100 years, since the 1850s thereabouts, and the experimental studies in regard to the memory was pioneered by Hermann Ebbinghaus. All the findings and conclusions from these studies are in agreement with the Torah, which says, quote, and these words of the law which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall diligently teach them to your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk along the way, when you sit down, and when you arise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorsteps of your house and on your gates. End quote. So candidates, as you employ this technique, it has been proven that the information that is read or studied can be retrieved from your memory for a long period of time as compared to the popular techniques. I hope you will find this technique helpful as I explain it here on the whiteboard. So candidates, you'll allow me to demonstrate why I think the techniques that you apply could be the major contributor to failure in exams. As I had mentioned earlier on, I visited the Kenya National Library and I observed that most students are studying using the following techniques. using the following techniques. The first popular technique among students is rereading. The second one is highlighting and underlying notes as they read. You find students with the highlighters, very nice colors, green, yellow, blue, red, highlighting. That's a technique. Then the third one, which I've also used many times, is summarization of notes. Summarization of notes. Rereading candidates is just reading again and again. I've seen students in my experience, students reading notes. They just read notes, reading, just reading notes. Then after reading notes, after some time, students starts reading again. Okay, that is rereading. And in my experience, I've seen students taking notes in class passively. Students who appear for tuition in class, I've seen students just coming to take notes. They take notes passively, and at some point, about a month to exam, they embark on the process of reading and rereading. They finish the book, then start again, finish the book until they do the exams. That is rereading. This technique is the most popular studying technique among students, and there is a wealth of research that show this kind of technique produces very little or no benefit for learning because it's passive. This kind of studying is passive. In addition, the information that is gained through merely reading is stored on the short-term memory, meaning that information is not stored in the memory for a long time. All right, that's why you will hear a student tell you that I've read this book, I've read these notes 5 times, but I cannot remember anything. The reason is when you resort to just reading and rereading, then in other words, you are trying to cram. And when you cram, that information is simply stored on the short-term memory, which is lost over after a very short period of time. Now, in 1885, Hermann Ebbinghaus carried out experiments on himself, which he used to come up with a curve, which is known as forgetting curve. And this curve looks like this, and there is time on that axis. Then on this axis there is percentage of information that is remembered, and that curve, that's how it looks like. Okay, so here you have number of days or weeks, time, and this is the percentage of information that is remembered. Now, the forgetting curve candidate shows the rate at which information is forgotten if there is no effort to retain it. That's why if you are to attend a lecture, on that day, you may remember 100% of the lecture. You may remember everything. But if there is no effort, this is day one. If there is no effort to retain this information over time, say after 1 week, this is 1 week. After 1 week, you may find that the percentage of information that is remembered is about 10%. Because the first day you remembered everything, okay? Could remember everything, day one. But after 1 week, you may forget 90% of what you had learned. And depending on the nature of the information, sometimes it may not be a week. It may just be a number of hours. There are students who even forget within the same class. After a few minutes, the student cannot recall, cannot retrieve what has been learned within that lesson. So the forgetting curve shows the rate at which information is forgotten if there is no effort to retain that information in the memory. That is what was discovered in 1885. Candidates, and the fact that this information is forgotten within a short period of time does not mean that you are a dunderhead or you are thick-headed. No, that is how memory works. When you attend a lesson, the first few hours or minutes of that lesson, that information is stored in the short-term memory. So it's upon you now to push this information to the long-term memory. You need to put in some effort. Okay, there has to be deliberate attempt to retain this information that is obtained. So don't be deceived that you can just attend lectures on day one, then you understand everything, or you take tuition once and you just get everything once and you can retrieve that information after 4 months. It's not possible. There are only a few people who can do that, and it's a very small percentage of people who can do that. These are 0.00 something percent of the population we have now, and these are people who have what we call photographic minds. Otherwise, the rest of us, we have to put in effort in order to remember what we learn. And that begs the question, how do you push information from the short-term memory to the long-term memory where you can retrieve it after a long period of time? Candidates, there is one effective method which I've personally used and I continue to use to date, and is a technique that is evidence-based. There is research to back this technique. Psychologists call it active retrieval, or active recall. They call it active recall, or retrieval practice. In simple terms, this is simply testing yourself. These are psychological terms, but these are things we know. It's only that we don't practice. Testing yourself. And how do you test yourself? Number one, teach someone a topic. Teach someone a topic. I've seen many candidates before a few weeks to exam, they hibernate. You find them reading in the library from 8 to 8. Then throughout the night, they don't talk even to their spouses. Reading. That one is not beneficial. What will help you is by teaching. If you have a spouse, sit down the spouse. Teach, explain. That is what we call retrieving or recalling. Try to teach someone with the book closed, the notes closed. You speak out. Okay? You speak out. You teach someone. If you don't have a spouse, switch off your television and speak to it. All right? Speak. If you don't have a television, the chair. Put the chair, speak to it. That is teaching, but speaking to the television is talking. Talk things through. Talk things through to someone. Talk to someone about what you are studying. Speak out. Retrieve. Then number 3, write. Write down everything you can recall. Write it down. Instead of just reading, sit down. If you have a topic like capital budgeting, sit down with a pen, with your nose closed, blank paper, write it down. You can also write down by answering past paper questions. Instead of reading answers, don't read answers. Sit down with the question topically, day 1, topically. Answer a question from the past papers. Then check from the past papers and make corrections where necessary. Write down. Okay? That is what we call active recall. It's a contrast of passive reading. This is passive reading, just reading books, then rereading, then just making notes. That is passive reading. But when you teach, when you talk, when you write from your memory, from your brain, that is when learning occurs. That is how to push information from the short-term memory to the long-term memory. That is active recall, retrieval practice. Testing yourself through teaching, through talking, through writing, and so on. So the act of retrieving information from the brain strengthens connections in the brain. It strengthens connections in the brain because, again, remember, we learn through correlation and repetition. So that very act of retrieving information from the brain strengthens the connections within the brain, and we learn far much better. By retrieving information from the brain, retrieving by practicing retrieving than by putting stuff in the brain. We learn far much better. That's a very important point. You need to write it down. We learn far much better by practicing retrieving information from the brain than putting information in the brain. So these are some of the ways you can use to recall, okay, to retrieve information from the brain, teach, talk, write down. So, and if you remember, candidates, this is what the Torah also suggested. Remember the Torah. The Torah suggested, says that, and these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. Goes ahead to say, you shall diligently teach. Okay? You shall diligently teach your children. Then it says, and you shall talk of the words while seated in your house. Then it also mentioned about writing. You shall write on your doorsteps and on your gates. Teach, talk, write. The individuals being commanded in the Torah, these are not children, these are grown-ups. You learn by teaching, you learn by retrieving, by talking, by writing from the memory. So candidates, that's a very important technique. If you are to apply this technique, then you will not struggle, you will not fail exams, you will not struggle answering exams. Learning will be fun. These are techniques I've used. I'm not just talking. These are the techniques I use every day. Okay, retrieval practice. And this technique is supported by evidence. There is enough evidence to prove that students who practice retrieving information from the brain perform far much better than students who merely read and reread, or those who highlight or underline notes, or those who make a summary of notes and so on. And that does it for our today's episode. In our next episode, we'll talk much more about study tips. If you have enjoyed watching this video, give it a thumbs up. If you've not enjoyed watching, give it a thumbs down. Below the video on YouTube, there are two thumbs, one that is facing up. If you've liked this video, click it. If you've not liked it, there is another thumb facing down. You can click it. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, please do so. Bye bye.